"Excuse me, but I think there's been some mistake." The voice was smooth, confident, but not aggressive. Devin Mitchell stood in the narrow aisle of Pinnacle Airways Flight 1847, his dark eyes fixed on the blonde woman, who had made herself comfortable in Seat 2A. His boarding pass, slightly crumpled from the rush through JFK security, clearly showed the same seat number. Victoria Hartwell did not even look up from her phone at. First, her perfectly manicured fingers continued scrolling through luxury reel estate listings, each property worth more than most people earn in a year. When she finally raised her head, her blue eyes swept over Devin with the kind of dismissive assessment that wealthy white women had perfected over generations. She said, "Oh," a voice dripping with condescension that came naturally to someone who had never been told no in her life, and added that she was sure they could work something out, suggesting he find another seat since she had already gotten comfortable. Devin was tired in a way that reached his bones after 3 days of back-to-back investor meetings in Manhattan, where he had spent hours proving why Skychain Innovations deserved funding, often being the only black face at the table. His casual attire, a black hoodie, dark jeans, and expensive sneakers that most people would never guess cost more than their monthly rent, was intentional. After years of suits and ties, he wanted to travel in comfort, but he was learning that comfort was a luxury with conditions. When "You look like him," he kept his voice level despite the frustration rising in his chest, and told her that Seat 2A was his assigned seat, according to his boarding pass. Victoria then gave him her full attention, and he caught that familiar expression he had seen countless times before, disbelief mixed with barely concealed disdain, a look that said, "People like you do not belong in places like this." She admitted she could see the boarding pass, but insisted mistakes happened, explaining that she was a Pinnacle Platinum member who had specifically requested a first-class window seat, and that the flight attendant could surely find him something more appropriate. The word appropriate hung in the air, heavy with meaning. It was a kind of coded language that had followed him through Harvard Business School boardroom negotiations and countless interactions, where his presence was quietly questioned behind him. Other passengers began noticing the hold-up, some craning their necks, while others looked away, not wanting to involve themselves in what was quickly turning into an uncomfortable scene. Devin glanced at his watch, feeling the weight of the moment that had been a gift to himself after Skydeck's IPO, though it remained hidden beneath his hoodie sleeve, and the gesture was not about checking time, but about maintaining composure. In his backpack was a laptop containing emails that could move millions of dollars with a single keystroke, contracts that employed thousands of people, in strategic plans that could reshape entire industries. But none of that mattered in this moment, because to Victoria Hartwell, he was just another black man who did not know his place. Devin answered carefully that he understood her concern, but that this was a seat, and he would appreciate if she could check her boarding pass and find her correct assignment. Victoria laughed sharply and dismissively, telling him he was confused about how things worked here, and reminding him this was first class, then pausing to let her eyes sweep over his casual clothing before adding that this was not where people usually dressed so casually. The words carried their intended sting, and Devin had heard this same message his entire adult life. The questioning of the credentials, the assumptions about his background, the subtle and direct suggestions that he did not belong in spaces of privilege and power. What Victoria did not know was that Devin Mitchell was not just another passenger. 3 years earlier, through a careful series of acquisitions by Skydeck Innovations, he had become the majority owner of Pinnacle Airways, holding 65% of the airline, from the planes to the routes to the very seat Victoria was refusing to vacate. But Devin had learned long ago that revealing power too early often led to accusations of arrogance or intimidation. So it was better to let situations reveal people's true nature, to see who they really were, when they thought there would be no consequences. "I am not confused about anything," Devin replied, his tone steady, but carrying an edge that made a few nearby passengers glance up from their phones. "This is my seat, and I would like you to move." Victoria's eyes narrowed slightly and used to being challenged, especially by someone she clearly viewed as beneath her social standing. She lowered her voice to what she likely thought was a reasonable tone, though it carried the accent of old money and older prejudice, and told him she did not know what kind of game he was playing, but she was not moving. She reminded him she had flown Pinnacle for 12 years and knew how these things worked, and if there was an error, the airline would sort it out in a way that made sense for everyone. The implication was clear to her. Someone like Devin did not deserve to be in first class, no matter what his boarding pass said. It was casual racism wrapped in the language of procedure, and reason. Devin's phone buzzed in his pocket, likely his assistant Kai, wondering why he had not checked in yet. But those millions of dollars and thousands of employees faded into the background as he stood in the aisle of his own plane, being told by a woman who had likely never worked a day in her life that he did not belong in a seat he had not only paid for, but technically owned the moment stretched thick with tension and unspoken implications as the other passengers watched their eyes darting between Devon and Victoria like spectators of a match, some uncomfortable, some curious, and some silently. Choosing sides, Devon decided this would not be one of those moments. When he moved aside to keep the peace not today, he told her firmly with new authority that he was going to ask her one more time to move because this was a seat and he intended to sit in it. Victoria arched her perfectly sculpted eyebrows in an expression meant to intimidate, while her Louis Vuitton handbags claimed a seat beside her and her designer shopping bags cluttered the floor. Everything about her posture screamed ownership of the cabin itself. She told him he was misunderstanding the situation, reminding him she was Victoria Hartwell of Hartwell Properties, developers of luxury communities in the Northeast, and that she was not some random passenger, but a VIP who had specifically requested this seat. Devon remained calm in the aisle, boarding pass still in hand, as he watched her perform her routine of name-dropping and assumptions that wealth and connections could override fairness. He addressed her as Mrs. Hartwell, emphasizing her name, and told her he was sure she was important in her field, but importance did not change seat assignments, and his boarding pass clearly said 2A. Victoria's sharp, dismissive laugh suggested she found it all absurd she called him sweetheart, and said he was taking this far too seriously, asking when was the last time he had flown first class, and insisting that mistakes like this did not usually happen. The question hung in the air like a slap designed to humiliate and force him to admit he did not belong. Victoria's eyes glittered with the confidence of someone who had never been told her assumptions might be wrong, but Devon had been in enough high-stakes negotiations to recognize a power play, and he knew she was not confused about seat assignments, but was testing him to see if he would back down. He replied calmly that he flew first class every week, usually on the same route, and that in 3 years of flying Pinnacle Airways, he had never seen someone refuse to leave his assigned seat. Victoria's smile faltered as she recalculated, clearly unsettled by his quiet confidence. She looked him over again, trying to reconcile his casual appearance with the composure he carried. Finally, she leaned forward with a sharper tone and told him that surely he understood how these things worked, and that sometimes accommodations had to be made because she had a connecting flight in Los Angeles, and I specifically need a window seat on the left side of the plane for the view, and I am sure Pinnacle can find you another seat that meets your needs. Devon felt his phone buzz again, and this time he glanced at it quickly. A text from Kai read, board meeting moved to 2 p.m. PST. Need you on the ground by noon. Everything okay? Everything was definitely not okay, but not in the way Kai expected. Devon typed back quickly, flight delayed, handle the prep calls, we will be there. When he looked up, Victoria was watching him with renewed interest and asked in a tone that carried mockery if he had important business. She added that she hoped they were not keeping him from anything too urgent. Devon slipped his phone back into his pocket and told her that as a matter of fact he did have important business, which was why he wanted to settle into his assigned seat so they could take off on time. Victoria's expression hardened and the polite veneer began to crack, revealing something sharper underneath. She leaned forward slightly and told him to listen very carefully, saying she knew exactly what he was trying to do, make a scene, cause a fuss, and probably hope for some kind of compensation or upgrade, but that it would not work with her. The accusation struck like a physical blow, and Devon felt the familiar surge of anger that always came when people assumed his legitimate presence in spaces of privilege was fraudulent or opportunistic. It was the same prejudice that had haunted his entire career, the belief that a successful black man must be running some kind of scheme. Mrs. Hartwell, Devon said, his voice low and dangerous. I am not running a scheme. I am not looking for compensation or an upgrade. I am simply trying to sit in the seat I paid for on the airline ticket I purchased legally and legitimately. If that threatens you somehow, that is your problem, not mine. Victoria's face flushed red, and she raised her voice loud enough that passengers nearby could hear. She snapped back that he should not flatter himself, and claimed she was trying to resolve the situation quietly and reasonably, while accusing him of being deliberately difficult. She said she had offered multiple alternatives, and that his refusal to be flexible told her everything she needed to know about his character. Devon almost smiled at that. If Victoria Hartwell wanted to talk about character, they could certainly have that conversation, but not here, not like this, not while she still believed she held all the power. My character, Devon repeated slowly, an interesting choice of words. Tell me, Mrs. Hartwell, What exactly does my character have to do with your refusal to move out of my assigned seat? Victoria opened her mouth as if to respond, but then thought better of it. Instead, she reached up and pressed the call button. Above her head, firmly, the soft chime echoed through the first-class cabin, and passengers turned their heads to watch, realizing that what had begun as a misunderstanding was escalating into a confrontation. Victoria announced clearly that it was time to get the flight attendant involved.